tonight?
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, we keep getting questions coming in. So tonight we're going to drop a bunch of questions that are fun to go over for everyone. If you're a teacher, student, singer of any kind, just sit back, drop us questions as we go to. If you see anything or have a similar question, we'll look for your comments. Okay, so the first question, just going to jump right on into question number one. Question number one, here we go. What makes singing soulful, right? You hear sometimes someone say, wow, that singer's got a lot of soul, right? So why don't we unpack that, jump into that? This question comes in from I'm gonna mess it up, but Omotoso.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Um, so yeah, this is a question that we could have deep philosophical conversations about, and really spend plenty of time on this topic. It's really hard to, put an absolute finger on and say, this is what makes everybody sound soulful. Because what is soulful? I think that your definition of it could be different than my definition of it, different than, any other voice teacher, any other audience member. And that's why some of us are drawn to an artist where somebody else isn't. We perceive that there's a certain amount of soul in this one person's voice where somebody else may not hear it. The best guess of what we have that makes that big difference are the little variations in the way a singer uses the language. And we're actually getting a lot of this information, it's shedding light on things from the world of artificial intelligence. And to see the computer scientists, as you would know, Mike, you're in that field, are really working on trying to make those AI assistants like Alexa or like Siri sound more human-like. Right? You don't want to ask Siri a question and then have her just read to you in monotone. It would be nice if she said, "Good morning, Matthew," and it had some inflection to it. Right? So that way we felt like Siri's more of a human and not just, a robot. And so what scientists have been doing is scouring the world and taking examples of different vocal qualities to different people in different countries of different cultures who speak different languages and asking, what is this sound quality to you? And so, for instance, if you hear somebody go, oh, most people would assume that's something kind of like painful or down low. It's not a good thing. If we hear, most of us would assume that that's probably a good thing. If we hear, most of us know that's a bad thing. And if we hear, we usually know that's like a comforting thing or a good thing. And they're finding that like when they go and ask these respondents, they find 85% agreement on what these different vocal qualities mean. And that goes across all, ethnic backgrounds, language, culture, country. It seems to be universal. And in one of the papers I read, they said, this kind of gives a lot of, credence to that idea that we all come from one language that then divided out into many. Because otherwise, why would we have cultures all around the world who perceive the same vocal qualities as having the same meaning into it, right? So then they break that down a little bit more. And it's the way that people not only deliver the words, but the intricate parts of the words. Things like an onset. An onset is how you start a word. So saying amazing grace is what we would call a clean onset. And that gives me one feeling of soul or of interpretation. But if I make it aspirate and go, amazing grace, that gives it a different feel. So the attack of each word gives us a perception of soul or of meaning of what's being said. The same goes for the way that we end a sentence or a phrase, right? If I end it upwards, that means one thing. And if I end it downwards, it means another. So doing amazing grace, how sweet the sound, that gives one meaning versus amazing grace, how sweet the sound, which has a different one to it. So it's the little inflections along the way. We're also finding that it has to do with the way that the vowels are pronounced. That in traditional classical singing and choral singing, you go for these pure vowels. You're just trying to hold an ah as cleanly as possible. But normal people don't speak with pure vowels. If we did a sentence...
Hold on. Can you speak with pure vowels? I'm just curious what that would sound like.
What makes singing soulful?
Okay.
Right?
So
So is when we have hyper pronunciation of the words, and if we're really trying to get exact vowels, we lose some of the ups and downs of speech. So this becomes a training thing, right? that we can actually train the soul out of somebody and their singing.
No.
And this is where voice teachers have to be careful, right? That's kind of shocking to think about that we could do that. But think about this. If we are learning through this research that people have some natural inflections in different emotional states of being. So one paper I've read classifies it as high energy emotional states and low energy emotional states. And we can categorize that a high energy emotional state has fast attacks, bright vowels, firm vocal fold closure, right? And it tends to be at a quicker tempo, and we might hold out notes longer in those places. And then on the opposite side of those low energy emotional states like tenderness or calmness or sadness, where we're going to hear more head voice coming into it, darker vowels, less vibrato, right? So we are finding that that's just what people naturally do. And if we train a person as a singer to sing only with pure vowels and vocalize everything, and then put them into a song that they wrote, we have the risk of them starting to try to put those pure vowels into their song. And that's going to end up making us lose some of the qualities in a voice that we perceive as being soulful. So what makes singing soulful is you using your natural pronunciation and your voice in a way that you would if you were telling this story to another human being and you really wanted them to empathize with you, to understand what you're feeling. If I say, Mike and I both have 3-year-olds, and, if I want Mike to empathize with me, I could be like, Mike, it's been a rough day today.
Yeah.
My 3-year-old picked up the Thor hammer and has been pounding his brother in the head all day.
Oh, no.
Yes, but we're getting through it. We're working through it. But you can empathize with that because you know that defeated feeling.
I know how you feel, man.
Right?
I'm right there with you.
That vocal quality you can connect with.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to sing soulfully, Omotoso, what you want to do is start off by speaking the words and trying to get them into a natural flow of speech and thinking about how your inflection would craft, right? How does your voice raise up and down? Does it fall off at the end of sentences? Does it have an abrupt ending? Does it have an abrupt start? Does it smooth into the start? And just start speaking those words. So I could take, again, since copyright law, we'll use Amazing Grace, but we could sing Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound, right? And I can choose which words I want to emphasize in it. And I'm going to work it out in speech till it feels like the way I would talk to somebody else. And then I'm going to start putting it on pitch. And then as I put it on pitch, I want the pitch to enhance the story, not replace the story, right? Because if we start thinking too much about vocal technique and we start trying to place our voice in a certain spot or get a specific sound, we might lose out on the storytelling part. I just had this conversation with a student, I think it was yesterday, we were teaching, and he says, I know, but that's not a pretty sound. And I said to him, well, what kinds of songs and stories do you sing that are pretty? Because this isn't somebody who plays love characters. And we had a long conversation that not every story is pretty. A breakup song isn't pretty. So I don't want a high note in a breakup song to be pretty. I want it to be intense, right? If I'm singing some death metal and, we're doing some Ride the Lightning by Metallica, I don't want those notes pretty. I want them angry and intense, right? If we're going to go sing some dance song like Be Happy, I want my vowels to be bright and happy. I don't want them to be pretty. But if I sing Your Song by Elton John, which is the song, my wife and I danced to at our wedding, that I might want it to be pretty as my voice is capable of. But how do I get to that place? By singing those words to my wife and making her understand how much I love her. And when I do that sincerely, my voice takes on a different tone quality. And it's that tone quality that it takes on through connected singing, where I'm putting the language first that's going to bring through the soul in a singer's voice.
Got it. So there's a lot of what you're talking about is the emotional context and how that is conveyed, or, you talked about onsets, you talked about, the way you phrase the emotional feeling with the words.
Yeah.
Now, just a question, not to put you on the spot, but soul, sometimes people might think that it has some philosophical or religious meaning. So if someone says, oh, that's very soulful. So do you think that has anything to do with it? Is there some big spiritual part to this question? Or do you think it's just the emotional and the words that are being sung?
I think it depends on the person. I mean, we have MRI brain scans that show people in meditative states and the brain changes that happen. So, whether you're religious or not, you can't not look at the science and realize that when people are in a deeply connected religious state of being and prayer and meditation, their brain waves are different and their brain starts lighting up in different places. So now, whether that's an alien beaming something down at us, God, a chemical reaction, I think that's what everybody on this entire planet's trying to figure out all the time. But, there are people who really feel connected spiritually to their art and the way that they use their voice. In fact, there's an entire spiritual path called the path of sound and light. And the idea, if you read through the books, is that everything that we see is a vibration, right? Light is just vibrations. And everything we hear is a vibration. It's a vibration of airwaves. So we see and hear vibrations, right? And so I'm sharing my vibrations with you when I sing. My vibrations leave my body as sound and they enter your ear. And so we are connected on a very intimate, special plane through vibration. So there are lots of spiritual beliefs throughout the world. And I think that, yes, for a lot of people, soulful singing is connected to something spiritual and religious. And for other people, it's just deeply connected to who they are authentically. It's when they bare their soul, when they share their stories, that most people aren't willing to get up in front of an audience and share.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say is that a lot of it can be just the authenticity and how truthful and honest the singer, the storyteller is being in what they're saying and how they're communicating that, and how that's being received then by the listeners. So a lot of different thoughts on that. Anything else before we jump on to the next question?
No, just play, and really try to deeply connect to what each word means and why you're singing those songs, because that's one of the best places to start if this is new to you.
Great. We have one question. Let's see. Jump over to the chat. This one's from Jan D'Angelo. She's asking, if singing isn't soulful, is it really human? Aren't we spiritual beings having a human experience and not humans having a spiritual experience?
That's a good point, Jan. I know, Jan. We go back. Yes, that's a good point. I mean, look, there's lots of, that's what I say, there's so many ways to, look at this. But, music, they think that Neanderthals sang, right? We believe that humans probably vocalized musically before they spoke language. And we believe that because after a stroke, one of the first steps of getting somebody to talk again is to get them to sing. Because most people can sing before they can speak. And if we listen to babies and you watch them entertain themselves, they entertain themselves by making vocalizations that have a wide pitch range, right? When they're excited and playing with toys, their vocalizations are going up and it gets really high and squeaky. And then, when they've made a mess of their diaper, they get really angry. Those vocalizations do. When they're hungry, they get really deep and really intense, right? So, but they're vocalizations that have pitch and time and tempo. So, yeah, there's a lot of people that believe this is connected to the core of who we are as human beings, singing is. And it's a spiritual experience for many.
Awesome. Great. Well, we went very deep on that. Thanks, everyone, for sticking with us. We're going to jump on to the next question we have. Let me switch over to that one. Okay, so I would like to know if it's even possible to develop my voice on my own. This comes from Chuck, and we get this question more often than I like to share, but we do get a lot. Voicelessons.com, people will submit, and hey, do I need a coach? How does your program work? Or can I just study on my own? Do you have a course or any of that? So, but I always recommend, it's always best to work with a coach. And just my quick answer on this is you want those outside ears, right? So Matt, I don't exactly know how you're going to answer it, but the best thing about having a coach is they can listen to you very differently than you can listen to yourself. Wow. So, and then an experienced coach that knows a lot about voice training can guide you and give you exercises and point you on the path. So that said, Matt, what do you have for Chuck on this one?
Yeah, a lot of what you said. I mean, ideally, every athlete has some sort of a coach or a personal trainer, right? Mm-hmm. And singers are vocal athletes. So what's an athletic activity? Anything that goes above the normal responses we should expect from our body. So, we can walk. Everybody can walk. Once you want to start running, though, you're starting to move your body beyond its normal responses, right? We are designed to run to a certain extent. But, when you start getting into these crazy marathons, that's when you definitely are reaching out to a coach, because you're trying to get your body to do something that's extraordinary. We're all designed to speak and all designed to sing. But if you're trying to, really wail out big, high tenor ballads, you're probably going to need to get some specific training to coordinate your muscles and your larynx and your vocal tract to make that happen. Now, there are always people who are innately gifted in different ways, right? You've seen that, you go and watch a group of middle school kids playing basketball, and there's that one kid who's tearing up the court, and you just can't believe the kid's playing like he is already in 8th grade. Right? There's something about him genetically that he won the lottery. He won the genetic lottery. And it's all just designed, and it's coming together. They're coordinated, right? And
some people they have that natural talent, and it can happen the same with singing too. There's, it's unfair. You get that really gifted singer that doesn't have to practice, doesn't have to study. But there's the other 99% of us, that do need a coach, right?
And then a lot of those ones who are naturally gifted and don't need a coach fizzle out, because it came so easy to them that once they start running into any difficulties, it destroys their world, because they were so used to it just coming naturally. And then once something doesn't come naturally, it's really hard for them to wrap their mind around, and it can be really defeating and have a
really tough,
psychological toll on it. So, Chuck, there are lots of things that you can learn on your own. And look, I come from, a lower income family where I couldn't afford voice lessons. I had to, I scraped ceiling paint to get voice lessons and mowed yards and everything else under the sun, right? And, there are things, if you just can't afford a coach, that you could learn on your own. I think if you watch enough videos about breathing, you can start to learn breath management techniques that will definitely help you sing longer phrases. But that's not necessarily going to take care of any tensions that are in the way, right? You could watch some of the videos I've put together about with the MRIs that show you how all your vowels work. And you could start trying to do some of the tongue twisters and get your tongue more agile. That'll probably give you some good improvements. But if you're trying to do any kind of special, resonance, like a belt resonance or a classical resonance, that's going to be kind of tough to do without another set of ears to listen to you and help nudge you in the right direction and guide you, right? You can definitely read up on body mapping and take some online courses to gather a better body map so you understand how everything lines up and improve your alignment. But that doesn't necessarily going to take care of making the connections between that body mapping idea and how you apply it to singing. And so a lot of times you're going to need that person to connect those dots. So, there is a lot that you can do on your own, but you're going to get a lot better progress with fewer frustrations if you can work with somebody, right? And everyone's path is different. I mean, I have people that I've worked with before who I work for 3 to 6 months, and they're able to sing the stuff that they want to sing, and they're thrilled. They like to do an open mic night. They have some simple songs they want to sing. They don't have any big goals of high notes or volume. They just want to, feel better about their singing. 6 months later, they're done. And it's a small investment on their part. Then I have other singers who are pursuing a professional career. I have some military singers that I work with in the military bands, and they're on tour throughout the year. They're going to be doing this for 20, 30 years, and they're constantly training their voice because they know that the voice changes with age. Their performance conditions are always changing. The rep that they're trying to sing is always changing. And they know that the only way to be able to do their job at that high of a level is to continue training. Now, a lot of singers look at celebrities and they go, but they sing and they don't have voice lessons. That's not so true. In fact, there are quite a lot of teachers or singers out there who have coaches that you will never know about because they pay top dollar to keep it private. There are teachers in New York, LA, $300 an hour easily. And they don't advertise their client list. You may not ever find out what their name is, but the producers who work with the artists and know who those people are, they know they're discreet and they can keep it to themselves, and they take artists in there to get help. There's also a lot of speech language pathologists who are what we call singing voice specialists, and they work in some of the world's best voice care clinics, like Harvard's Voice Center, the Philadelphia Ear, Nose, and Throat, where Dr. Sadaloff is. Duke Voice Care Center has some great people. There's many great voice care centers in this country. And they have speech language pathologists who understand the singing voice. And when a singer gets injured, the speech language pathologist retrains them how to use their voice and will address some of the singing issues that they hear along the way. So they're getting coaching and adjustments. It's just coming through on the medical side through a speech language pathologist. So don't, be fooled into thinking that these pros don't have people. Ariana Grande has somebody. Selena Gomez has somebody. Adele has somebody. The singer of Lamb of God, the death metal band, has a voice teacher. Sarah Bareilles has a voice teacher. Lots and lots of people do. And so there's no reason not to find somebody to help you.
Yeah, so I think it's important though, Chuck, you may not be ready for one today, and that's okay. We're not absolutely suggesting you have to have one to get started. There's plenty of things, and early on, even as a young singer myself, you can make a certain level of progress by grabbing another instrument like a guitar or a piano and teaching yourself some rudiments of scales and music theory, and working your voice up to an octave or an octave and a fifth, and learning your voice on what it can do and what it can't do, so that then you have maybe you develop some questions of what you want to learn, because some of the discovery in any learning process initially is trying to understand where you are. And once you understand where the beginning is and where you are, you can then uncover, I don't know this and I didn't know that. But you didn't know that. So it's important sometimes just to get started somewhere, even if it's not with a coach today, maybe it'll be a coach tomorrow or next week. And then there's also, with everything that's going on right now with online learning, there's a lot of great digital courses. Matt's made a great one for us called How the Voice Works. That's got some great just knowledge to consume and understanding, so you can get a real grasp of the instrument, because the tricky thing about learning to sing is you can't see inside of your own voice. And even then, your own inner ear, the perception that we have of our own voice is different than what others have of it. So there's a lot of different things that you'll overcome as you go, learning about how to sing. But definitely drop us any more questions if you have some, or you need a great place to get started. Sometimes coaches will just work with you for a couple sessions to give you a base, so you can understand where you are in the process. Great. Anything else, Matt?
Oh, that's great.
Cool. Okay, so we'll jump on to the next one. And this is always a fun one. I want to know how to do certain riffs. Okay. And this comes from Rylee, and my short answer is scales. I practice a lot of scales.
So Rylee, look up the pentatonic scale. There's a major and a minor pentatonic scale. It's 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. All right. So let's see. I'm turning on my keyboard here. So the pentatonic scale. You want to learn how to sing within that pentatonic scale. The minor one. People riff all over those two scales. And then the third scale you want to start learning about is the blues scale. Right? Because what artists are doing is they're fiddling around most of the time with some variation of those different scales to make up their riffs.
And they're not necessarily starting at the bottom or the top. Sometimes they start in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
Down a little bit, up a little bit, down, over, all over that scale.
But what you want to do is start getting accustomed with how far away notes are, and so that way your riffs are clean, right? Getting accustomed to making those different lips and skips and jumps, knowing where the core pitches are. But then the next thing, what I would suggest, is you go over to YouTube and you find some artists that you really like. And then if you look for the little gear icon on the bottom of the YouTube player and you click on it, you're going to see that you can slow down the speed or speed it up. You can drop it all the way down to 25% of the speed of the original. And if you drop it down to 25 or 50%, they have some amazing technology that keeps the pitch there, but just slows it way down. And you can start to break down the riffs. So you can sit there using your little 15-second back mark, let it play, jump back at 25%, jump back, and just break it down into chunks. If you hear them doing, hey, you just want to get that little lick. Hey, 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 hey. And then eventually speed it up. So you'll take it down to maybe 25% to really hear the intricacies of it, move it up to 50% as you're kind of digesting it. If you have a keyboard nearby, I would start trying to, transcribe the riff. So get maybe some sheet music if you know how to write out stuff on a staff, get staff paper, and sit down at a keyboard and write down the notes that the person is doing. If you play more by ear, that's fine. Just start learning it on the piano so you can have a physical sensation of the distance between the pitches. And this is one of the things that I find that, yes, you can learn to riff by ear, and ideally we want you to get to that point. But for those people who can't, what I found is really helpful is doing this physical playing of the riff on the piano, because then they feel the kinesthetic awareness of their fingers moving at different distances, at different intervals. And then it's easier for them to find those different distances and intervals in their larynx as they're jumping around. It also improves their pitch accuracy because they're actually locking it in and going, oh, it's there to there to there, instead of just trying to wander around, right? So some people can just wander. Other people need that. You do you. But you're then going to take, after you slowed it down to 50%, move back up to maybe 75%, and then eventually move it up to 100%. I wouldn't try to find the most complex riff possible. I would look for even little licks along the way. And every day, if you sit down and try to do at least one, if not 2 to 3 of these a day, and you commit to it for a month, you're going to be way better at riffing, right? You can't help it because you're actually doing the work, breaking down the riffs, and getting it into small, digestible, bite-sized pieces that you can stack together. And along the way, make sure that you're listening to lots of different singers, right? If you love Ariana, don't just listen to her. Go listen to some Whitney, right? And get into listening to Whitney Houston. Go listen to Yolanda Adams, right? Go and listen to other people who, have a slightly different style and feel like an artist, right? One of my favorite books by a guy named Austin Kleon, but he talks about how no art is ever made in a vacuum. We all have influences. So if you want to be a great riffer, you got to start gathering multiple influences, not just one. You want to try to look for 10 to 20 singers that you love and start learning all of their riffs. And then as you learn their riffs, you might start deciding that you want to combine a little bit of person A's riff with a little bit of person B's styling. And then you get an A and B combo. And as you play with that A and B combo, it'll start to just morph into your combo. And then the more that you do that, you're just going to start coming up with ideas on your own, and you're not going to feel like you're borrowing anymore. You're going to be just creating on your own. So anybody can do it. It just takes time. It takes diligent practice and work and a commitment to sitting down, doing the listening, and getting all those riffs on your voice.
Absolutely. Motor skill development, and I think the scales Matt's talking about, these are half steps, whole steps, minor thirds, right? And all the different combinations of those that you have to practice and literally drill into your voice, into your muscles, and instinctually into your mind so you can hear what you want to riff before you do it. And so lots of practice. And I don't know, Matt, maybe we can have a breaking down the riffs. Natalie Weiss, maybe we can have it.
Yeah, we should have her on.
We should have her on, do some riffing.
There's a couple other people I'd like to get on to talk about it soon.
Great. Okay, so Rylee, hopefully that answers that one. Let's jump on to the next one. Question I have. Let me find it here. Oh, here it is. Okay. How does one project when singing softly? And this comes from Carys?
Carys, I think. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Got it.
So in
how do you project?
You don't. It's soft, right? And what the problem is that we all listen to our favorite singers on the radio, and we get a radio sound in our head. You have to remember that when the artist is in the studio, they're singing with the mic maybe 6 inches away from their mouth, maybe even up closer. They are in a silent room, right? A soundproof room where there's no external fan noise, engines driving by, nothing. It's quiet. You can be in that studio and you can sing barely above a whisper, and they can capture an amazing recording of it. Then they go into their system and they use something called compression, which allows them to kind of put a cap on how loud things get, which then allows them to lift up the soft. And then if you have a song that has some soft and loud, and you really want to get detailed, which your major recording artists are going to do, they go in and hand draw dynamic markings in where they move the slider up for the soft part and then drop it a little bit lower for the loud part. So it sounds like they all match up together. So when you're listening to some of these recordings, you're like, wow, that's a really soft sound. It's just as loud as the high notes in their belt. I need to learn how to sing softly that loud. You can't. That's the microphone. That's the technology. And
Got it. So that's you're talking amplified singing.
Amplified singing.
Okay.
And the thing is that if you try to project your voice acoustically in a way that matches what was produced electronically, you're going to end up squeezing your throat. That's the only way you can do it. To get a soft sound to project, you're going to be squeezing and pushing a bunch of air at it, and it's going to end up causing all kinds of tension. So instead, you want to focus on letting air release. Sound is made by vibrations of air molecules. And the only way that you can make sound is if you move air molecules. And it doesn't take a big engine to move a lot of air. Think about a hairdryer versus an idling car. Which is louder, a hairdryer that's running or an idling car that's sitting next to you that's running?
It depends on the year.
This is a good point, right? Let's take, but you're more modern. Let's take my Prius.
Is it a Prius? It's electric. There's motors not running.
And
These
it
are
is,
good questions.
right? It's quiet, though.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our new cars are really quiet. The hairdryer's louder, but the hairdryer has a smaller engine. The reason the hairdryer is louder is it moves more air. It's sucking air in through the back in the little fan, and it blows it out, usually after narrowing it down into a tube and then blowing it back into the room. And that's where it gets its power. And it moves a lot of air, so we hear a loud sound. Whereas those car engines have a whole muffler system that moves the air through a whole lot of different turns to soften the sound so you're not pushing as much air out into the environment, which is what makes it a little bit quieter. So you don't have to try to drive a Mack truck through your voice to make sound. You just need to make sure that you're moving enough air that you excite the air molecules around you to create sound. So I hear people trying to go, ah, and they're squeezing. And the way to actually project that is, ah, where you release all of the air. Instead, you feel like you're exhaling. Now, some classical singers do want to be...
I was going to ask you, what about that? So that's good for amplified and microphone and pop. But what about for acoustic singing? I remember, many times needing to mark, right? So, what are the techniques you can do if you're an acoustic singer who needs to project, but still you want to sing softly or save your voice for upcoming performance?
So we talk a lot about registration on this show. And so this comes back into more of a registration question. So we have, a thick vocal fold production that we call chest register, and then a thin fold production we call head register. Chest is the buzzy sound, the ah, and head is the breathy sound, ah. And those are produced by mechanical changes in your larynx. Your larynx has muscles that are moving parts around. And those parts regulate how thick the vocal folds are and how firmly they're pressed together. And so if you are trying to sing softly, but you needed to project acoustically, you might need to add a little more vocal fold closure to the sound. So that means that you're going to maybe mix a little bit of chest into that quality. Then, to help counterbalance the increased chest, which will make your voice a little louder, you could move from open vowels to more closed vowels. And so we can think about the voice as either taking on a megaphone shape where everything's opened up, so that's like going ah, or you can think of a reverse megaphone shape where the mouth opening is rather narrow and it's the back that opens. Ah. So if you want to sing soft, you can close the mouth and add chest voice, and it's going to muffle it a little bit. And then if you open the mouth all the way up and do the same thing with the same registration, it gets louder, right? So part of it is the way that you use your pronunciation. And this goes in line, again, with some of that AI research we were talking about at the top of the show. Normal people, when they want to keep something intimate, they feel like they pull their voice in and they close their mouth and they don't move it as much. That's just what people do. So even when the audience sees that happening, they're going to perceive us as being softer than if they see our mouth wide open, which we perceive because of our conditioning since birth as being, a loud vocalism.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is that you can definitely project, you can definitely do it. It's some changes in the registration, which are then going to affect the resonance. So I think what she's asking is she still wants to be able to be heard, she still wants to project, so we still want some resonance, but we don't want to use the same amount of breath, or pressure is going to get increased because you mentioned you're going to increase the medial compression, right? By bringing in the arytenoids from the sides, you're still going to have to get the same pitch out. So you got to be careful with that. And a lot of this, I think you mentioned the exercise, a lot of messa de voce.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the best place to practice this. Hopefully you're not singing this on the highest note in your voice, but I would definitely do it towards the middle and the upper parts where you do work on some messa de voce, so you can gain that control. And then when you want to back off the note, you have the right registration set up to do that. So
what we're talking about, Carys, is a registration-based messa de voce. You start off really breathy, go to full chest, and then come back to breath. So it'd be something like this. Right? You're going to practice that up and down your range, and then try the reverse, where you start full chest, go back to the head, and go back to chest. And that's basically teaching your vocal folds to explore all of the possibilities, and then just stop at different places along the line. Swell a little bit and pause. I take a bigger breath than what I just did as you do it. But, like slowly move and just stop along the way and start discovering what it feels like to be in those different ratios.
Great. All right, cool. So hopefully that answers this one. I'm just going to check the chat real quick. Awesome. Rachel, thank you. Fascinating. This is always fun stuff to chat about. So for sure. The next question we have, where did it go? I just saw it a second ago. Here it is. Okay. Oh, great. I want to know how I can better my voice by bettering my posture. This comes from Maddie, and as I'm like hunching over for the show.
I know, right? Right.
Check your posture check, everyone. How are you sitting right now? How are you breathing? Okay.
Yeah.
Check on it. Body check.
So most of us had our posture in a pretty darn good spot when we were young and we were learning to walk. Because if you don't balance your body, you fall over. So you start learning pretty soon, as you're getting older, of how to balance it. And then our body starts growing rapidly, and we get our muscles stretching out, and then we can become uncoordinated. And then as we become uncoordinated, or some muscles grow a little tight on us, or we gain a little bit of weight, things start dragging in different directions. Mm-hmm. We find ourselves with bad posture. That's how we end up in that spot. So we have to get to the root problem of posture, which is tense muscles or weak muscles that are not engaging or are over-engaging and getting in the way of allowing your body to align. And this is where practitioners of Alexander technique can really come in handy. They can get in there and help you realign your body and get into a much better spot. Same with Feldenkrais practitioners. They do some of the same work. So if you feel like you really want to dive deep into posture, seek out somebody who does Alexander technique. Body mapping is another one, or Feldenkrais. A lot of yoga practitioners are really good with this as well. So you can seek out a yoga instructor or a Pilates instructor. Especially what's good about yoga is you're learning to stretch all of those muscles, that connect to all the different points of your skeleton. And as you stretch, it's going to be a lot easier to return to that natural balance. And what a natural balance is it's aligned up with what we say are 6 points of balance. So the first point is down at the ankle joints, right? And I did a whole workshop one time in the NATS intern program where we had a physical therapist who came in and looked at people's ankles and arches. And she was able to show us how if somebody has an arch that fell in, it would rotate one of their ankles. And then if the other one didn't, that would ricochet up, tilt their pelvis. As soon as their pelvis was tilted, then it tilted their lumbar vertebrae, and now the rest of their spine was out of alignment too. It was insane. Then she would go through and tape up their arches or tape up their ankles and then get it into the more accurate place, and you would watch the rest of their body fall in line, and then when they would sing, everything would just release. So it truly can start down at your feet.
At your feet. Wow, that's amazing.
It can even start them too with what shoes you're wearing. If you're, wearing any kind of a heel, you now have put your foot at a weird angle, which then makes your ankle joint have to balance differently, and that can ricochet all the way up, right? So even though that seems really far away from your head, it matters. It's your grounding to the earth. Mm-hmm. Moving up from that, we have our knee joints. And we know that people will stand up weird and they'll lock their knees and make yourself pass out, you know, or then we get a real casual slouchy posture where the knees are, you know, real loosey-goosey.
Or you get nervous while you're singing and it shakes.
Yeah, I know. I've been there, done that. Right. And so those knees, you know, we want to try to make sure those are balanced. There's an idea of plumb line posture, which isn't as widely accepted now, but there used to be the idea is that you wanted your knees somewhere around in alignment with that ankle joint. Right. The problem with plumb line posture is a lot of people end up trying to stick to it and they get stiff and rigid. That's why I prefer them. Yeah. And you got to remember that plumb line posture actually came out of French military training manuals teaching people how to carry a rifle as they marched. So it was this military drill thing that started to creep its way into singing. And, you know, some people's bodies line up pretty close to that and other people just don't. And they have to figure out how to align their body up, right? Their ears might be a little bit more forward. And then if they're trying to shove them back to line up with their shoulder, everything here tightens up and we're in a bad spot, right? We also have people who have injuries. Like my wife has a twisted vertebrae in her neck from when she got thrown off of one of those merry-go-rounds, right? And so she got thrown from a merry-go-round, damaged her neck. She now has a twisted vertebrae, cervical vertebrae. So her neck is always going to be forward unless they do a surgery, which is kind of dangerous, right? Which is why she hasn't done it. But she can't get into anything that looks like plumb line posture. It's physically impossible. So, you know, we have those different things. So we can't say that it's always going to line up exactly. If we move up from the knees, we then get to the hip joints. And we got to look at how the hips are positioned, right? Your pelvis rotates on that hip joint. And if your pelvis is all tilted back, it can affect everything up above if it's tilted forward. So you want to try to balance it out. Then moving from that, you want to look at how that lumbar vertebrae down in the back and that thorax align. Are you getting real swayed back? Are you trying to stiffen it up? How's the balance of those thoracic vertebrae, which lie behind your rib cage, in relationship to the lumbar vertebrae, which are those lower back vertebrae? We want to see how those line up. Then you want to look at how your arm structure lines up. Are you bending your arms way forward? Are you pulling them way back? Both are not good, right? It can happen with a lot of people who weightlift and get obsessed with bench pressing. So you'll see somebody who gets obsessed with bench pressing, and all of a sudden their shoulders start really rounding down and forward because they can't work out their back muscles, right? They need to do some serious stretching to open up those pecs, and they need to do some strengthening of the muscles in their back. Otherwise, they're going to be out of alignment because their muscles are too tight up here in the front. Then finally, what we want to do is find the connection point of the cervical vertebrae to the skull. It's called the AO joint. So here's the skull, and that would be where the AO joint goes in, base of the skull right there, right? And it actually lies right in between the ears. And so that AO joint is between your ears, and that's where you want your head. Yes, that little indentation.
I can't really get there unless I cut my head open.
Yeah, right? But it's still, you can feel the little indentation where it's going.
It feels good to massage back there. You know, especially I was going to say with all this computer time we're having to spend right now, you really got to be careful. Like you're not hunching over or like leaning into your computer because that'll mess your thing up.
Right? And it starts putting, I can't remember what the degree is of angle, but it's like every 10 degrees adds like a pound of pressure on your vertebrae. It's something that when I read it, I was like, no wonder people have neck problems when they lean over all day, right? So you want to make sure that you're moving your head from that AO joint side to side, up and down. A lot of singers try to move it from the little hump that's right above their shoulders. That's the connection point between those cervical vertebrae, which are behind your vocal tract, and your thoracic vertebrae, which is what your rib cage connects to. But when you move that, you're distorting the space that surrounds your vocal tract. So here's what those cervical vertebrae look like. There you go. Yeah, I was going to say, get it over there. So the white spot here are your cervical vertebrae. And as you can see right in front of it is the vocal tract. So if you're trying to move from way down here at that cervical thoracic connection and you're bending this all over the place, you're directly affecting the vocal tract. But if you move the AO joint, which is more up right there, and you're moving from that point, and this is fairly, stable, then you're not messing with your vocal tract. And this is really important for acoustic singers, classical singers.
Which one is what number is right behind the larynx? Is that 6 or 7?
Well, this one it's so coming down from here, the second, third, fourth. It's like 4 and 5.
4 and 5. Got it.
Yep. All right. So But those moving and getting your neck in weird positions can affect your vocal tract. It can affect your larynx's ability to tilt, and your larynx has to be able to tilt in order to change pitch. So you can find out if your neck's all the way like this, you may start losing your high notes. So you have to realign your posture. The other thing that really matters too, is that has that big impact, is anything below the rib cage that puts the rib cage into a weird position, right? Because the rib cage houses your lungs, and the diaphragm runs all along the bottom of the ribs. So if you're all crunched down, all of a sudden you're directing your lungs down and back, and your diaphragm is trying to move in that direction, and you're not going to be able to expand and take a full inhalation, right? If you're hunched over to one side, you have one lung that's compressed down here, your diaphragm is not going to be able to move as much as it needs to in order to get a full breath and to have any control over the flow of air as you release it. So what we're really looking for with posture is anything that can get in the way of the way that you breathe and in the way of your vocal tract and your larynx up in those cervical vertebrae. But because everything is interconnected, we have to also remember that the lower body matters, and we want to make sure that we're paying attention to our hips, because the sacral vertebrae that attach to the pelvis connect to the lumbar spine. So every time you move the pelvis, you're taking that sacral vertebrae with it, and it's going to mess with the lumbar spine. And anytime you do anything weird with your, ankles, knees, they can have a ricochet effect up to your pelvis. Then it'll start to tilt it, and that goes all the way up to the spine and into your cervical vertebrae as well.
Wow. So there's a lot you can learn about your voice by improving your posture. Yep. So just do a quick body check again. Are you taking deep breaths right now? Are you shallow breathing? Are you hunched over your computer watching this show? Are you leaning back? I mean, there's a lot you can just check in with yourself there for a second, but you can better your voice a lot. Just all those points that Matt just shared. So many different thoughts to consider. Yeah, so much.
Stretch. Because stretching is going to help you overcome those weird postural things that Mike just mentioned. Right? Yeah. If you're sitting like this all day, you're actually scrunching down the muscles in the back. They contract to bring the back part of the cervical vertebrae closer together, which bends your neck that way. So you need to do the opposite and tuck your chin this way to stretch those muscles out. So if you have any muscle that you're realizing, God, that muscle is staying contracted, do the opposite and extend it, right? Optimally, to get a positive effect from a stretch, you need to hold it for at least 15 seconds, but holding it beyond 30 seconds doesn't have any positive benefit. So 15 to 30 seconds is your ideal spot.
I was going to ask, what do you think about visiting a chiropractor? Is that advisable? I know some singers like to do that. They find they get relief from having an adjustment and things like that. So do you think that's more like a quick fix, or do you see that as something that can be, suitable for singers to use?
To be honest, there's lots of things about the body that don't bother me, but chiropractors, cracking my back freaks me out, and I've never done it.
Really?
Yeah. And
I'm one of the singers, I really like it because I do, I tend to work on a computer a lot too. So for me, it can instantly open things up. But, you got to go. It's kind of one of those things. If you're not actually retraining with some of the body movement programs you mentioned, you still wind up with the same bad habit. So next month you got to go back in, and it's more of you're more just treating the symptom than rehabilitating or re-educating your muscles and your posture. So you don't need that. So, but sometimes it can be helpful. You can get a lot of relief if you are kind of stuck. So it's something to explore.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we've got two more. Okay. Thank you, guys. All right, this is a great question. How do I sing an E and an OO vowel in chest voice? What is the tongue jaw position? This comes from Laura. So do you have any MRI, or are we going to use a model of the show?
Oh, I don't. Unfortunately, I don't have the MRI today. That would have been a great time to whip it out.
Okay, maybe we can drop the link into it if we do have it.
We can do that at the end. Okay. So this is, I think, we're going to go with the simplistic answer tonight. That we have vowels on one side we have like a closely related vowel chart, right? And on one side are the vowels that have more of a high tongue position and more horizontal lips. And then on the other side, we still might have some horizontal tongue arching. It's not going to be as much as you're going to see on the tongue vowel side, which is where E lives. But on that other side, the lips become more and more part of it, and they can't be spread anymore. They have to start moving forward, and that's where oo lives. So E and oo are on the opposite sides of this closely related vowel chart. When you're singing an E vowel, you're not going to have a whole lot of mouth opening because E has a lot of high frequencies. And any time that you start to narrow the vocal tract, you start producing more high frequencies. Anytime you enlarge the vocal tract, you're going to produce more low frequencies. E is a high frequency vowel. So in a high frequency vowel like E, that tongue is going to arch up and get really close to the roof of the mouth, and there's only going to be about that much opening on the inside.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you just say E right now and then say ooh and then say E again, just feel where your tongue goes.
Yeah. So,
E, right to the top.
Yeah. And your lips just instinctually from wide.
E, right?
Okay? Mm-hmm. Find the tongue position for an E, you're going to say he, because that H, our body knows how to produce by getting that tongue arched up and blowing air over the curve of our tongue. And then the E falls right into that same basic position. So the H is going to get you there. He. Then from that position,
it's almost the same spot. I was trying to think of what you could say that wouldn't be an E vowel after the H. You do ha, but you still got to get the tongue all the way up.
Yeah, A is closely related to E, so those two are pretty close together as well, right? But that gives you a start of a place. Okay. Then what's going to come out of your mouth, if you have more of a, like I call it like a one finger mouth opening, like a pinky finger mouth opening. He. That's tongue behind the bottom teeth, and it arches up as if we're saying he. Now let's say you get that sound and you don't love it, and you're going, but that's still not my E vowel. What you're going to do is listen to yourself. And the way you're going to listen to yourself is you're going to firm your hands up and put them in front of your ears. And what's happened is when we sing, we have some sound that goes directly out, and then it'll come back at our head. This is going to block that. So instead, we're going to hear more of the full room sound of our voice. It also is going to amplify that full room sound, so it's louder than the internal sound of our voice. So in this position, you're going to get a much more accurate version of what you sound like. So let's say you get into that E vowel, and it's like this. Not a good E vowel. At that point, what you're going to do, you're saying, well, my tongue's arched. It is. It's just arched back. So the way you're going to find your good E vowel is to start moving that tongue all around in your mouth. Just let it just move. And keep moving it until you land in a freer spot where all of a sudden the E comes into place. All right? Because it's primarily a tongue vowel, we need to get that tongue moving around until it slides into the right spot for that pitch. Because there's a very narrow amount of space in an E vowel, because of how high that is up towards the roof of the mouth, you're going to have minimal airflow in an E. And one of the things I see where there'll be problems is somebody will be trying to sing an E vowel and shoving all the same amount of breath as they would on an Ah vowel. Well, Ah is the most open vowel we have. Your tongue is relatively flat and everything's elevated and air can just pour out. But if you try to move that much air through the narrow space created by E, you're going to end up creating tension that's going to be problematic. So also back off some of that breath pressure. Now on the opposite side, we have oo. Now oo, the tongue does bunch up in the back a little bit. It doesn't arch up though like an E does. But an oo is a lip vowel, and lip vowels require our lips to be highly involved. And if they're not, our body will compensate, and the place that it compensates is usually in your throat around your larynx, and that makes things tight. So I'll see singers going, and their lips aren't, kind of rigid and wide, and they're not getting their oo vowel, and all they have to do is bring them forward. Ooh, and all of a sudden the oo comes into place. So again, you can use that morphine technique that I just showed you before, and if you have a weird ooh, chew, move things around, get those lips back and forth, and then try to land into a better sounding oo vowel as you listen to yourself. And if you want to see some of these MRI things we were talking about, head on over to my blog. My blog is edwardsvoice.blog. And you can look up MRI IPA chart. There's a search box. Just look up IPA chart. It's not a beer. IPA is the International Phonetic Alphabet. And it takes you to a website. One of the California universities actually has a whole clickable vowel chart and consonant chart where they have different, I think 3 or 4 different people that went into an MRI machine and made every vowel and consonant. And you can just press play over and over again and watch how the tongue moves to form at each vowel and each consonant.
Awesome. So we can grab that link. That'd be great to drop in here for anyone that wants to do that extra credit. Laura, hopefully that answers your question on that. I will say one of the tricky things with some of this with these answers, we don't exactly know what your voice sounds like today. So some of the advice we're giving you, you might have jaw tension, there might be tongue tension, there might be some other tension in the way. So things, even though we're trying to help you and answer it, might not fully work for you yet. That's where a coach can definitely help. And then sometimes some people develop vowels in the purity of the vowel or the strength in a vowel at different times and different lengths of study in order to get it. So it might just be the muscle coordination might not be there yet for you. So hopefully that helps explain it, and we'll drop those links in the MRIs where you can take a look as well. Okay, I think this is the last question here. So, where did it go? Here it is. Okay, cool. A last question for tonight. How do you release pressure caused by the tongue? This comes from Greg. Wait a minute, I was just talking about that. There can be extra pressure, extra tension. So if you've got that, Greg, check out what Matt's going to give you on this one. Matt, what do you got?
So some of the same things as like getting the tongue into the right position. So a lot of times tongue tension isn't actually tension. It's a lack of coordination and agility, right? So we do know from plenty of research that there are certain positions our tongue needs to be in order to form specific vowels.
It's got to move. If we didn't have a tongue, would we have vowels?
No, you'd have a problem, right? And so what ends up happening though is that sometimes people, they might talk rather softly like this all the time, and they don't have an active tongue. And then they go to sing, and because their tongue has never been really active, they don't have a lot of agility in it. So then they go to sing E, and their tongue doesn't really have the coordination to move up into that higher arched tongue position that you would want for a singer's E. And so then they perceive that as tension. They're going, oh, my tongue's tight. Well, the tongue's not necessarily tight. The tongue's trying to figure out what to do because you have an inaccurate map of it. You don't know what it's supposed to do. And so one of the best things we can do is to get you an accurate map. And so this would be one of those, again, go to that IPA chart, start learning what the tongue positions look like because it matters. It matters enough. And, my course, How the Voice Works, I have a whole chart in the workbook to help people be able to just look at the chart, go through their vowels, and start figuring it out because it makes a world of difference. This is also one of those things that's kind of like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? So is the pressure caused by the tongue, or is the pressure caused by registration that's imbalanced for which the tongue is trying to compensate?
You know what my answer is going to be.
Yeah, right. Both. And so what can happen is that we know in order to form a vowel, you have to have certain frequencies. And those frequencies are not produced by the vowel shape. They're originally produced by the vocal folds. And so if we're trying to sing an E vowel, the vocal folds have to create enough frequencies, what we call harmonics, to power that E vowel. And that requires a certain amount of that chest register that we've talked about, a thicker vocal fold production with a good amount of closure of the vocal folds. There can't be leaking a ton of air. If we don't have that happening and it's more of a breathy sound, trying to sing an E is tough. He, I can get it, but it's not going to be super clear. But if I just change up those vocal folds, the E will start to come into place. And then as it does, I can start to hear that E needs some help, and then I can start to help it out and give it a little bit of love. So you're also going to want to check that registration balance, which we've talked about on plenty of other of our previous shows. But go look at how to balance out that mixed part of your voice. And then what I would say is anytime that somebody has this tongue agility problem, you want to start working on tongue twisters and specifically isolating the movement of the tongue from the jaw. Because a lot of times when we are speaking, swallowing, the tongue and jaw are moving together. But when we sing, if we're trying to get a certain kind of resonance, we need the tongue to move independently of the jaw. Because if the jaw is moving all the time, it's constantly changing our resonance. We want to minimize some of that movement. So you want to try to isolate the jaw by putting your hands on your cheeks and stopping it from flapping up and down, and then move your tongue. I like to start with a ya-ya. So you put your tongue behind your bottom teeth and you do this. You do it even without sound. Just get it moving. Then you put sound to it. Yeah, 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 yeah. Now, I've had a bunch of students first week back at the university. I'm working with our new students, whole new crop of students, and they're like, that seems like it should be so easy, but my tongue doesn't move. And they're watching their tongue like flopping around in their mouth. That's normal, right? That's what it's like when you don't have a whole lot of agility. What I'm showing seems easy, but it's not for a lot of people. So you're going to have to get that to free up. And then you start going through the various consonants, like L's. You get the L flipping up behind your upper teeth. La 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 la. Get ga working. And ga, the jaw's going to move a little bit, but you want to minimize it. Ga 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 ga. Right? You can go through every consonant, play with them, try to get your
those are the good ones. The Y's, the L's, G's, perfect.
Yeah, right? And then look up tongue twisters. I have a whole downloadable list on my blog, edwardsvoice.blog. You can go down there, look for tongue. You can look in the categories on the bottom, especially if you're on the desktop version. Click tongue. It'll give you a whole bunch of various exercises to help isolate the movement of the tongue from the jaw. But specifically look at the McCloskey tongue twisters. He was another pedagogue, more on the speaking side of things, but a lot of singers use his work as well. And he developed all kinds of tongue twisters that work the articulation of the different parts of our vocal tract to help improve this kind of an issue.
Yeah. Now, is it true? I didn't give you any heads up on this, but is it? It's true, right? The tongue is the strongest muscle in the human body.
Maybe in relation to its size.
Its size, right? Yeah. Obviously, your legs are probably stronger than that, but.
Tongue can press 400.
Density-wise, I'm talking muscle density. It's pretty powerful.
It is, and it's pretty big. I mean, if we go back to the model, I mean, look how big it is compared to the rest of the vocal tract. That's the tongue, all that red right there. That's pretty big compared to everything that's down here. Your vocal folds are that little tiny spot right there. That's your vocal folds, and then that's your tongue. Tongue is significantly bigger. And so, yeah, the tongue can get in the way quite a lot, can cause a lot of problems. But if you improve that tongue agility, most of the time those problems disappear.
Great. Well, good. So let me check the chat, see if we have any questions that came in. I don't see who this one's from. Can my students use a Chromebook? Yeah, we're on Facebook right now. I think they can use the Chrome browser. If you're talking about the Voice Lessons app, if you're talking about our software platform, yes, we do support the Chromebook. Use the Chrome browser. You'll be good to go. Let's see. Anything else on here? Yes, for sure. The tongue is one of the most difficult parts, and sometimes some coaches don't even talk about the tongue movement, but it can definitely be one of those things that it can tongue tie you a little bit sometimes.
I would say on that Chromebook too, if you're talking about online lessons, possibly, just know that your video is trying to your computer is trying to do a lot of processing to run video and sound at the same time. So some of those Chromebooks might really struggle to kind of keep up with both. It might just degrade the quality a little bit. It's going to depend. I haven't played with them enough, but you can get it on the blog. Definitely, you should be able to do the MRIs from a Chromebook without a problem, and you can do how the voice works from a Chromebook as well.
Great. Yeah, and I was saying also our platform does work on Chromebooks, so if you are looking to do that, you can do that. So, okay, cool. Yes, Dorothy, I don't know, maybe we can dedicate a show at some point to the tongue, and we can go find out what are all of the current debates about the tongue. I know some coaches think it's the root of all evils, right? So, I mean, it can definitely mess things up. And you got to have, for me, I'm a big registration fan. So you want the registration free first, because sometimes the tongue is, it's above what's happening at the vocal fold level. So, guys, this has been a good show, some great discussion. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Jan, thank you. Rachel, Dorothy, thank you so much. And all the questions that we have, some really good questions. So thanks for everyone for the learning you're doing, for your curious minds seeking the truth. We're happy to help answer these questions. And even if we didn't fully get it all the way, hopefully we give you enough to digest, give you more things to think about. And Matt, any final words?
No, I think just explore. So many people focus so hard on getting it right that they don't just play. Right? And a lot of our greatest guitar players that people idolize, they just picked up the guitar and started working with it. And they started playing with it and experimenting, and they came up with really cool stuff. They got some lessons along the way maybe, and then they just experimented. And so what I would say is, you know, don't be afraid of taking the same approach with your voice. Experiment, see what sounds it can make, see how your tongue moves, how your lips move, and what sounds result from that. And you might be surprised at what you discover.
Yeah, I mean, you only need 4 chords to have a pop song. So just pick a simple progression and do some exercises. Have some fun. Do some riffs. There's a lot of different things we talk about tonight. You know, check your posture out. And if you are curious, we'll drop the link to the How the Voice Works course. It's how-the-voice-works.com. We'll drop that link in there too. We still are offering an amazing launch special on that course, and it's 4.5 hours of content, Matt. Some of just the golden gems that we put together. So, yeah, we hope everyone can learn from us. And if you have questions, if you're a teacher, you have questions you want us to answer, drop those in too. If you're a singer, a student, drop those in as well. We do this every Thursday night. And we've got a fun season lined up. We've got several interviews coming up. So super excited, everyone. Hopefully, as you're returning to school, if you are going back to school, you're being safe. And everyone just stay safe. Follow your local suggested guidelines. But wear a mask and stay home as much as possible. So, all right, everyone. Have a great week. We'll see you.
Nice.
Bye.